Hi, good morning, Hemant. We'll just wait for a few more minutes and then we'll start. Good morning, everyone. We will continue our journey on regression today. So, last whole week we have spent in learning how to perform the regression function, which was the first one in our predictive data science, where once the data is available to us, Then we make a prediction, and we were taking the housing price prediction as our first example. Then we started the first iteration with the linear regression, and then we went on to experimenting with different types of regression. So today what we will do is that try to understand what these different types of regression are. So first we had talked about linear regression, and we had discussed this in some detail earlier, that linear regression is that suppose these red dots which are being shown here, if these are the observations from the past. So on the x-axis, you have the feature, and on the y-axis, you have the label. So going back to the same example, if we take that, suppose x-axis is the amount of rainfall, and y-axis is the amount of rice produced in the country. If we plot them, and suppose these red dots are showing that when the rainfall was lower, the rice production was lower. And as the rainfall increases, rice production also increases. And I have this data for different years. Then if we want to build an estimator which can predict the rice production in the country given the rainfall for the year, then I build an estimator, and that estimator is what this straight line is. So, and this straight line will have the formula in the form of y is equal to bx plus 3, and the value of b is what we need to find out. The value of c is what we need to find out. So in this case, the formula given is, the 6x plus 3 is the best fit line. Now, the benefit of this estimator is that next time, if I am given that this is the rainfall for the current year, I can just go and find out. So if I have, say, next year's rainfall is given as a at this point, then I can directly go here, identify what is the value on this line, and then I can find out what the rice production would be, which would be the value on the y-axis. So that's the benefit of getting an estimator. And in the linear regression process, this is what we want to find out, and this is what we have done in the case of housing price itself. The difference between this image and what we have done in the housing price is that here we are trying to find out the value of y based on just one value of x. And in the case of the housing price, we have seen that when we were doing the experimentation, I have multiple values of x. It means that I don't have just one feature, which is rainfall. I have different feature like the number of rooms, number of bedrooms, and so on. So obviously, you will not be able to plot if the dimensions are more than 3. It means that I could possibly draw a chart if I have x1 and then y. I could make a 3-dimensional chart if I have x1, x2, and y, but I wouldn't be able to draw a chart if I have x3, x4, x5, and so on. But still, the way that the estimator will work is the same. So in the linear regression, we are trying to find out an estimator. And in the 2-dimensional space, this is what the estimator would look like. If there are more than 2 dimensions, then the formula will become, say, b1x1 plus b2x2 plus b3x3. It can go to bnx1 plus c. So that was the linear regression. In the same fashion, we could also do what is called the polynomial regression. So suppose this is the kind of data that we have on the x-axis and the y-axis. then a straight line will not be a good fit here. So any kind of a straight line that we draw here, that will lead to a large amount of variation, because it does not matter how you draw a straight line, you will see that the difference between the straight line and the actual observation, which is given by the cross here, would always be very high. And when we compute, and therefore it does not matter which line we draw, the errors would be very high. And how do we compute the errors? The errors is the difference between the estimator value, that is the straight line that we have, and the cross here. So it does not matter which way you draw the line, the error is bound to be very high. It means that my estimation will not be very accurate. In those cases, we use the polynomial regression, where not the straight line, but a curved line could also function. But polynomial regression works very well if you have, say, only one feature. But if you have more than one feature, then doing the polynomial regression becomes extremely difficult. That computation is extremely difficult. And therefore, if you have one variable, so if I have x and we have y, then polynomial regression actually can be drawn. But if you have multiple x and multiple y, polynomial regression becomes extremely difficult. And that is the reason we did not really try out the polynomial regression in the housing price data, because there we had 10, 12 different features. So that was the linear regression. Then we talked about the decision tree regression. Now I am introducing a new concept here, which you need to understand. So we'll go into some detail about what was this decision tree and how does the decision tree works. So as the name itself suggests, that it works in the root and the branch function. So when we talk about a tree has a root, and then as it goes above, it bifurcates itself, or from one tree several branches will come out. From that branch there would be sub branches, and that's how the tree actually grows. Now it's funny that when we draw the tree here, the tree is actually drawn in an inverse manner. It means that root is shown on the top, and then we show the branches, which is some people joke around that it's only because the people who do the computer science and machine learning, they hardly go out of their labs, and therefore they don't even know how tree looks like. Otherwise the root actually should be at the bottom, and you should open up the trees, open up the branches above. But anyway, when we draw a tree, the root will be on the top. So what it means is that what we do is that I have the entire data, and then I take one criteria and say that let's divide our data based on that criteria. So for example, if I have, say, if we go back to our housing example, then we could say that let's take the first criteria as income. So first attribute we take as income, and then we say that income is more than 200,000. So that becomes my criteria, which is equivalent of that we are showing as, say, here in this case, the x1 is less than 20. We could say in our case, income is, say, more than 200,000. So income is more than 200,000. After that, we will be able to divide the entire data into two parts. One part will be those records where the income is more than 200,000, and the second branch of the tree will become that data where income is less than 200,000. Okay. Now I have, so the first one we will call as the root or the parent node. So in this case, this is called the parent node, and based on this criteria, we have this child node. So first we divide the entire data set based on certain criteria. So it will go through the entire data set and see that in which records the value of x1 is less than 20. And so if it is less than 20, then we have some data elements there. And if it is more than 20 or equal to 20, so I am able to bifurcate my data into two parts. One is where x1 is less than 20, and the second one is where x1 is more than 20. So now I will have one parent node which is having the entire data. On that parent node, we apply one decision criteria, and based on that decision criteria, I will have two different child nodes. And then I apply a second criteria. Then again, from each child node, I will have, say, two other child nodes. So for these two green ones, this node becomes the parent node. So that's how we go on dividing, and we run a regression based on these decisions. So we could say that the first one could be income. On the second node, so after I have got two different nodes, the first one is having the income more than 200,000. The second one is having income less than 200,000. Then there we can apply a criteria that rooms are more than one or less than one, and that's how we find out. We draw a tree, and then if I have got a new data, a new set of data, I apply these rules on that particular tree, on that particular record. So suppose I get another record and say that where different values of the housing price or the number of rooms, number of bedrooms is given. So we'll just go on applying this criteria, and in the end, we will find out the price of the house. Okay. So this is what the decision tree is. The process is that we take a decision criteria which helps us divide our database into two or three, and that's how we go on climbing the branches, and in the end, depending upon what is the criteria it meets, we will come to a conclusion that this is the price what it should be. Now how the system does that in the back end, it will be experimenting with different criteria. So here we have just taken one criteria. It will be experimenting with different criteria and see that which criteria is giving me the best result. So just as we have seen in the case of regression. So suppose the first set of criteria is that income is income we divide based on 200,000. Then we divide that whether rooms are less than one or more than one, and then we divide that into, say, the median income is less than 5 or more than 5. So if we just do that, then the system will be able to divide the entire data set, and then whatever we see in the end, it will find out that what is the price if the criteria is met like that. So let's take an example here. Okay. Suppose the first criteria we choose is say income. Income we were given in the range of, say, 1 to something. So we'll say income is less than 3. And we start with when we are starting here, we had 2,640 records, isn't it? Suppose based on this criteria, we get here maybe 10,000 records, and here we get remaining 10,640. Okay. Then on these two nodes, and suppose now we apply a criteria here that if income is less than 10,000, now here we apply another criteria and say rooms is less than 5. Then I'll receive some more data here, and then we will go on bifurcating, and then we find out that in the last node, whatever we get, what is the price of those houses here, because that is what the price we are trying to predict. So let's write here. The rooms is less than 5, and here we get, now we are able to bifurcate this 10,000 into say 3,000, and here we have 7,000. So we'll just climb down only one branch, and suppose whatever we have got here, the price is the average price there is 300,000, and whatever we get here, the average price is suppose 200,000. Now say here 400,000. This is what the system would do in the backend. Now I have got, and for making the prediction, what we'll do now, let's suppose I have got a new data set where the person has got an income of, say, the person living in the house, the income is 2. That is the way the income is expressed in our file, and 2 may represent 200,000 or so. So we will come to this branch of the tree because the income is less than 3. And then suppose the house is having say 4 bedrooms, and then we'll see that house is the rooms is less than 4, and the answer is yes. Then we come here, and then we find that the average price is 300,000 as per my previous bifurcation that we had done, and therefore the system will say now that the price of this house would be 300,000. So if you see here, it's not really a direct computation like what we have done in regression. That is, in regression, we're trying to find out the weightages that we assign to each parameter. That is B1 for X1, B2 for X2, and so on. So if I have 10 different parameters, I will assign 10 different weightages, and then we multiply that, and then it gives me the value of the house. In the decision tree, we apply a decision criteria. So depending upon how many decision criteria we apply, the number of branches will go on increasing. So first criteria we applied on income, then we applied the room, then third one we could apply on bedrooms, the fourth one we could apply on location. Depending upon how many criteria you apply, the depth of the tree or the height of the tree. So since we are drawing here in the inverse fashion, we'll call it the depth of the tree rather than calling the height of the tree. So depending upon how many decision criteria we apply, the depth of the tree will go on increasing. And what in the backend, what the algorithm is doing is that it will try out with different, criteria, and then it will see that which one is giving me the most accurate result. Okay. So that's how the decision tree functions. Now, decision tree is very commonly used model, which we'll use not only in regression, but as we go further in the classification also. And in the classification, actually, the decision tree is used much more widely. but the process will remain the same. Now, how do we evaluate, or how does the system evaluate that the my performance or the performance of the algorithm is good or bad? We'll go into the details of the computation of that as we go into the classification model. But at this point of time, it is sufficient to understand that how the decision tree model works in the context of regression, or how does the decision tree model works in general. So the process is that we take the entire data set, we apply a criteria. Based on that criteria, the, the parent node is divided into one, or in the case of classification, we will see that in multiple nodes. So parent node now gets divided into different child nodes. Then again, on the child node, we apply a second criteria, which also then allows me to bifurcate the data. And then we apply a third criteria, fourth criteria, fifth criteria. And then we are able to reach the end, which is called the leaf. So the last ones will be called leaf. So all these, this is the root, this is the branches, this is the leaf. We're just borrowing the same nomenclature which we use to describe a tree. Only thing is that we depict the tree in the inverse fashion. It means that root is on the top and then branches are opening up below that. So if I have now, and so we go on dividing the parent node into different branches, branches into sub branches, and the division takes place based on the criteria that we use. Now in the backend, the system is doing the optimization, and it will find out that which criteria or which combination of the criteria is actually giving me the best result. Now if I have got a new data point, then I take the values and I start climbing the tree or descending the tree here, and then we will reach one leaf or the other. And then we will see that for that leaf, what was the average price. That's how the decision tree regression works. Is that clear to you? If that is clear, and if you confirm that yes, how decision tree works, if that is clear, then I'll proceed to the next one. But I need you to confirm. Otherwise, I'll spend some more time on explaining this to you. Is that fine, Hemant, Rishabh? Okay. So at this point of time, just let's see that how decision tree operates and how the system does the evaluation of each criteria, whether it's a good criteria or a bad criteria. I will explain to you later as we go into classification. But it's important to know how the tree itself is created. Okay, so let's go through this example again. In our data set, we had 20,640 records. Okay, then suppose we first we take a criteria and say that divide this data set based on the income, and my criteria is that whether the income is less than 3 or not. So there are two branches. One is which satisfies the criteria as yes, and the rest of the things which does not satisfy the criteria. So out of the 20,640 records, the system will see that there are 10,000 records which are having income of less than 3, and remaining 10,640 records would be having an income of more than or equal to 3, and therefore the entire 20,640 records I would be able to bifurcate into two child nodes. The first one would be having 10,000 records, the second one would be having 10,640 records. So the parent node gets divided into the child node. And how do we divide that? Based on certain decision criteria. Now you may ask the question that why I am choosing income is less than 3, why not less than 2, why not less than 5? We could do all of that and we will get different decision trees. And that is what the system in the backend would be doing. It will first experiment with, say, income less than 3, then experiment with income less than 4, then 5, and so on. So it will go on experimenting with different variables. But to understand this, let's assume that our first criteria is income is less than 3. I have divided my entire data set into two parts. One is having 10,000 records, the second is having 10,640 records. Then on that node, I apply a different bifurcation criteria or different decision criteria. And here I say that my second criteria is that whether the data set or whether the data element, whether the observation is having less than 5 rooms or more than 5 rooms. So based on this criteria now, again, I will have bifurcation of the parent node. So 10,000, suppose based on this criteria, gets bifurcated into 3,000 and 7,000. Now for these 3,000, I know that what is the price of the houses which are having this characteristic. It means that what is the characteristic of the houses in this node? That is what we are seeing here. The characteristics of these houses is that these houses are the ones where the income of the people is less than 3 and where the number of rooms is less than 5. This is the characteristic of the houses, and the average price of those houses is coming to 300,000. If the characteristic of the house is that income of the people living in them is more than or equal to 3, and if the number of rooms are more than or equal to 5, then I find that the average prices of that houses having that characteristic, their price is 400,000. Now, suppose this is how I optimized my decision tree. We are taking a very simple example for understanding the concept. Then another house, now I am trying to test my, I am trying to predict the price of a new house which has come for sale. Then I'll ask the question that does your, what is the income of the person who is living in that house? And suppose I get an answer of 4. If I get an answer of 4, then I will climb to this branch. But since we have taken the data for the left side of the branch, let's assume that the price of that house is, or the income of the person living in that house is 2. Then I come to this node. Then I'll come to this node. Then I ask the second question, how many rooms does the house have? And we get the answer of suppose 3. Then since the number of rooms is less than 5, then so the evaluation of the criteria gives me an answer of yes. And therefore I climb down here and then I see that the prices of this kind of house is 300,000. This is how the tree is structured, and this is how we make the prediction of the value. Now, the key question here is that why would I take this criteria? That is income less than 3, rooms less than 5. Why would I do that? So the answer is that in the backend, the system would be experimenting with a lot of different criteria, and then it will see that which criteria is giving me the best result. And when we say it is giving me the best result, how do we find that? Now, the difference or the errors would be computed again with the value that we predict and the value that the system actually has. And that's how the system will optimize. But in the case of the decision tree, the evaluation criteria is actually based on how pure my nodes are. But I'll go into that later on, that how the system actually optimizes and finds out that which bifurcation criteria is actually better. Okay, so I'll go into that. But what is important for us to understand in this session is that there is a process or there is a model for regression which is called the linear regression, where we try to find out the weightages or the multipliers that will give me the best result given x number of features that we have. Another way is which says that no, let's not go into that kind of computation. We can estimate the price just based by asking a few questions. And by asking a few questions, I will go on dividing my data set, and depending upon that, I will be able to make the prediction. So if the depth of the decision tree is 5, it means that I ask 5 set of questions, and at the end of those, I will be able to tell that what the ideal price of this house should be. So the assignment of the values, which you're asking, that when we say assignment of the values, that is income is less than 3 or more than 3, that is something I can see. What we can do now is that we can draw different decision tree based on different criteria. So I have one decision tree where the combination of income and rooms we take 3 and 5. I will draw a second decision tree where I could take the uh, criteria as a 4 and 6. So different combinations I could try, and the very purpose of trying with different combinations is that I would be able to find out that which combination of the criteria is giving me the best result. And how do we assess that it is giving me the best result or not? That process I will talk about later, because that computation we will talk about in more detail in the context of classification, but the process remains the same for regression also. So if the question is that how do we arrive at 3 and 5, this is what my algorithm is trying to find out. This is what the model would optimize, that what should be the value at the first node, what should be criteria and the value at the first node, what should be criteria and value at the second node, third node, fourth node, and so on. Is that clear, Hemal? Sure. So at this point of time, let's understand that one way that we have done is regression, which is if I have 5 different features, it will assign the weight to each of these features. And then by multiplying the weight and the value which I have received for each of these features, I'm able to find out the value of the prediction variable, and in this case, the value of the house. The second way is to use a decision tree where we have different criteria for dividing our data, and then starting from the root, we reach the leaf, and then whatever is the value of the leaf, that is what the value of the house would be. So that's the second way of finding out the price of the house. Then we also talked about the k nearest neighbor regression. Now this one is very intuitive, so but not very accurate. So it typically says that when we say k nearest neighbor, k is just denoting a number. So we could say that k is the number. Nearest neighbor is that given these features that we have, say 8 features suppose we have, when we say nearest neighbor means that which one is the closest value. So for example, I have the price of 20,640 houses, and each of them have different characteristics. Each of them have different attributes. Now a new house is brought for sale. One of the very intuitive ways of saying is that let's see that which house is the most similar to any of these 20,640 houses that we have. Which house is the most similar? And how do we find out which house is the most similar? We'll go to the value of each of these features. So for example, if there is a house with 3 bedrooms, the income of the people living in that is say also 3. The number of rooms, number of bedrooms, all of these we will evaluate and see that which house is the closest house in terms of the different features that we have. And then I have the whatever was the price of that house which is closest to the description of the new house that we have, that is the price of this house also should be, isn't it? And that's how we typically calculate the price of a say house. If you want to buy, what is the question that you ask, that okay, in that neighborhood, what was the price at which a 3 bedroom house was sold? So then you will find that okay, this house was on the 17th floor, and maybe there is a premium for the higher floors, and this house is for the the house which is come to your uh, the house that you want to buy is on say third floor. But the last deal which was done was for same in the same apartment for the same type of house, but it was on 17th floor. There is another deal that you come across which was in another apartment, which is maybe half a kilometer away from the house that you want to buy, and there it was on the say second floor, and it was also a 3 bedroom house. In that case, we will say that the closest that we have is the apartment, the closest data point that we have is the apartment which was sold in the flat which was sold in the same apartment, because that is the nearest neighbor. And it was also the same type of house. It was the flat with the same number of rooms and the bedrooms. And that's where you will feel that the price that you want to pay should be very close to the price at which the last deal was done in the same apartment for the same type of house. Maybe it was at a different floor. So you will compute the difference that should be allowed for third floor and 17th floor house. Otherwise, the price of the house should be the same. That is the way we actually work in our mind also. That if I have different observations, in this case, if I have the data about different houses, and if I want to make a prediction about a new house, what shall I do? I will see that which house is the closest in terms of the attributes, and whatever is the price of that house, that is what we will say that that's the ideal price. Now the question is that how do we find out that which other house is closest in terms of the attributes? So the combination of the attributes would be plenty. And as we have seen that if you have the houses could be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, or the total number of houses could be maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The location of the house could be different. So how do I find out that which other house is the closest in terms of the attribute? And that is what we call as the nearest neighbor. So from the entire data set, I will try to find out which house is the nearest neighbor, or which house is the closest in terms of the different attributes which I have. And then I'll take the price of that house, and then I'll tell my customer that this is what you're likely to get, because previously this type of house was sold or bought at so and so price. So that process or that house is called the nearest neighbor. It means that the house which has got the most similar attribute. Now the k nearest neighbor is that how many such nearest neighbors you want to take. So would I would I determine the price based on just one similar house, or maybe I will try to find out say 10 similar houses on n number of attributes. That is what the uh, k in this nomenclature denotes. So k denotes a number, and then we say nearest neighbor. So k nearest neighbor regression. So it means that I will try to find out those houses, or say k number of houses, which are the closest in terms of the attributes to the house for which I want to make a prediction. And that's how I will. So if I decide that k is equal to 5, that means I will, from the entire data set, I will try to find out the 5 houses which are the closest in terms of different attributes. I'll take the price of that, and then I will say that, take the average and say that this is what the price should be. Having said that, the next question is that how does the system really find out that which house is more similar to another house, or to the house that we want to predict the price for? That is where the mathematical component comes in, and this process is called the Euclidean distance. So what you find out is the Euclidean distance. That is, what we do is that I have the value of the attributes of all the houses. Then I take the value of the same attributes or the same features of the house that we want to evaluate. We'll find out the difference between the two. So suppose the first house has uh, the first record that we have in my data set has 5 bedrooms. The house that we want to evaluate has 3 bedrooms. So that's the first feature. So we will uh, find out the difference between the two. So 3 minus 5, that will become 2. We take the, we take the square of that. Then we sum all these differences, and then we see that which one is the closest house. So on the attributes that we want to evaluate, we'll find the difference between the values of the attributes of one house and the other house, and then take what is called as the Euclidean distance. Is that we take the difference, we take the square, we take the sum. This process, the same process that we have done in the case of regression, or the, you know, when we were trying to find out the variance, we had taken this same approach. So I take each of these attributes. So house 1 will have some value for each attribute. House 2 will have some value for each attribute. We find out the difference in the values of those attributes. We take the square, we take the sum, and then we take the square root. So whatever are these values, that is called the Euclidean distance between house 1 and house 2. And wherever this distance is the lowest, then we say that that is the house which is the closest or the nearest neighbor of the house for which we want to predict the price. And then we take n number of such houses, and we take the average, and that becomes my prediction for the house. So here also the process is very simple, very intuitive. There are other ways to calculate the distance, but the most commonly used, and we will use mostly, the Euclidean distance. If you don't want to take the square, just take the absolute value of the difference. That also helps us in computing the distance correctly, because then the plus minus will not cancel out. We are taking the absolute value. So that process would be called the Manhattan distance. But mostly Euclidean distance would be used, but we can always use Manhattan distance also. And the third way is we take the difference, and here I have the flexibility, not just the square. This number of the square actually could be, I can take the raised to the power 3, raised to the power 4, and then we again take the sum, and then we take the nth root. So we first raise to the power q, and then we take 1 by q. It means that the qth root of that number, which is just a variation of the Euclidean one. So in the KNN regression, what we do is try to, so conceptually first let's understand conceptually, then we'll go into the maths. So conceptually, we are saying that we can make a prediction about the house by seeing that which is the house which is most similar to the house for which I am trying to make a prediction. So I scan through the entire data set which we have, then identify which are the houses which are most similar, find out the price of those houses, and then take the average of those prices and say that price of the house for which I want to make, which has come to me, should be the average of the houses which are most similar to the given house. So that's the process of K-NN regression. Next question would be that how do I really find out that which are the most similar houses? And the answer to that would be that we find out which house is the most similar by computing the Euclidean distance between house A and house B. And how do we compute the Euclidean distance? I take the values of the two houses on each of these features, find out the difference, square it, sum it, take the square root. That's the Euclidean distance between house 1 and 2. Is the K-NN regression part clear? Because some of these, again, going back to very often used methodologies which you would be required to understand. And the first level of understanding is that we get a grasp of the concept. Mathematics part we will go over and over again as we go into different types of exercises. So you will become proficient in understanding the computation part also gradually. But the most important part is to understand the concept. So if you see, the three things that we have discussed are following three different models altogether. So these are three different types of models. They follow different routes. So the regression route is that I take the features and I assign a certain weightage to each feature. Then I take the value of that feature, multiply that with the weight, and then I make a prediction. So if I have 5 features, x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, what we will find out as a part of my optimization process will be the weightages that I need to assign to each of these x1 to x5. So I will have b1 to b5, and then I compute b1 into x1 plus b2 into x2, and so on. I go until b5 into x5. I take the sum of that. That is what the value of the house should be. So the example that we have taken earlier, that given the area of the house, if you want to predict the price of the house, in that case, I have only one variable, area. Now the second variable you could introduce, that say area of the house, and maybe the um, the floor at which the flat is located, that could become another variable. So I will assign, say, some weightage to the area and some weightage to the floor, whether it is on ground floor or 20th floor. I give some weightage to the floor on which the house is, or the flat is located. Then I give some weightage to the area of the house. Then I could give some more weightage as to how far this house is from, say, the main road. So the houses which will be close to the main road, they will have a higher price. The houses will be slightly far from the main road, they could be having slightly lower price. So I will compute the distance between the house and the main road, and then I'll assign some weightage to that. And then by multiplying the weights with the values, I'll find out some value or some price, and that would be the prediction if we are using regression model. So regression model is following each feature, we are giving some weight, multiply that weight with the feature, and we find out the price. So that was one approach. Second approach is the decision tree approach, where we ask ourselves different questions, and based on each question, I start segregating this data. So in some of the quizzes that you may have done um, in the colleges, where I say that the answer is, say, Jawaharlal, so you are supposed to ask some questions and the answer would be given only in yes or no. So I will say that I am thinking about a person, and you have to identify that person in say 5 steps. So you will ask the question that is he a male or a female? Okay. So I will say that this person is a male. Is he a politician or not? Then I'll say yes, he is a politician. Was he a prime minister or not? Yes, he was the prime minister. And did he belong to the Congress party or some other party? Now, that is how I am going on uh, pointing down or narrowing down the possibilities. And then maybe after asking 4 or 5 questions, I may uh, be able to make a very good guess that it was Jawaharlal Nehru or it was Atal Bihari Vajpayee, because based on the questions which I have asked and based on the answers that you have given, in 4 or 5 questions, I would be able to identify which person you had in mind. The same process the decision tree actually follows. At each stage, I ask a question that, and that question is called the decision criteria. So I ask the question that whether the income of the uh, person living in the house is more than 3 or less than 3 in the data set that we have. Then we ask how many rooms, how many bedrooms, and so on. And that's how I reach to a leaf. And for that leaf, I have a typical price given. So I ask 5 questions. I reach to uh, a leaf, and for that leaf, I have a typical price. That is the price I will predict. So that's the decision tree. The third method, which is very different from the previous two, and all these three are very different from each other. The third method is, which is very intuitive one, the kind of thing that we normally do in our life. We say that this is the house for which I want to make the prediction that what the price should be. The easiest thing to do, or the most intuitive thing to do, is to find out 5 other houses which are very similar or the closest, and then see that what were the price of those houses, and then see that since the very similar houses were sold at so and so price in the recent past, and therefore I can tell my customer that your house also would actually can be sold around the same price. That's called the K nearest neighbor approach. Then in the decision tree, we say that how do I know that the criteria which I am giving is the best criteria or not? We'll go into the computation of that later. In the K nearest neighbor, the computation is simpler, where we say that how do I find out that which are the other houses which are the most similar to the house that I want to make the prediction for? And then we'll say that I have the value of all these attributes. Let's find out the difference between the attribute 1 and attribute 2 of house 1 and house 2. Find out the difference, take the square, take the sum, take the square root, and I'll get different values for all the 20,640 houses compared to house A. And then I see that which one are having the lowest value. I pick say 5 of them or 10 of them, take the average prices of those, and then I am able to uh, make a prediction that what the uh, price of the new house should be. So that's the very intuitive one. So the closest houses are called the nearest neighbor, and K is the number of instances that you will take to make the prediction. So that's why it is called KNN or K nearest neighbor regression. So K nearest neighbor we'll also use in some other context, but this is how the K nearest neighbor regression works. Is this also clear? This is very intuitive, so I don't think there should be much problem in understanding that how do we find. So we have talked about 3 different methodologies, and they all of them follow very different logic in the backend. Then we come to another technology, which is another type of regression that we ran earlier. And surprisingly, this was giving us the best result. You remember from the when we ran our notebook with different types of regression, random forest was taking the longest time, and random forest was giving me the best result. If we just go back to our sheet here. So when we had run this regression, I think I should have the results here. Yeah. So if you see the different types of regression that we had run, random forest is here. Random forest is here. So random forest was giving me the highest R squared, the best result, and the lowest RMSE, but it was also taking the longest time to process, whereas others were taking less than a second. This one actually took about a minute. So let's try to understand what the system is doing in the random forest. Okay. So earlier we talked about decision tree, and we talked about a tree, and now we're talking about a forest. Looks like that, researchers in the machine learning, they're very fond of nature, and that's how many of the algorithms they have named after tree and forest. Maybe very environmental conscious set of people. But there is a relationship between that tree and the forest. So in the forest, we have a number of trees, and that's why we call it forest. We may have maybe hundreds or thousands of trees, and all the trees, when they are together in a place, then we call that area as a forest. Here also, it happens in the same fashion. So, what does the system do? In the decision tree, we talked about one tree. What the random forest does is that it will run the decision tree operation with multiple trees. So I have multiple trees, and those number of trees could be, maybe that is for us to decide whether we want to do this computation with 100 trees or 1000 trees or 10,000 trees. We can decide that, and then the system would run the decision tree operation, and it will make the prediction with, say, 1000 different trees. And what are these different trees? If we have different decision criteria, there would be that structure, the tree would become different. So for example, if we started with the income less than 3, now the structure of the tree would be different, because I got 10,000 and 10,640, suppose. Now if I change that criteria and say that the income is less than 2, then the structure of my tree would be different, because the size of the child nodes, or the size of the branches, that would differ. So what the random forest does is that it does not rely on one decision tree. It will take a large number of decision trees, take the prediction, and then the average out all the predictions. And therefore, it is actually removing the bias or removing the errors which you may get from one decision tree. And that's why now the selection of these trees, that for which trees I choose and make the prediction, that is done in a random fashion. And that's why it is called random forest. It means that, first of all, why we call it forest? Because the prediction is being made not by just one decision tree, but maybe hundreds or thousands of decision trees. That's why it is called forest, because it is a collection of the trees, collection of decision trees. Why we call it random? Because out of different possible trees, it will randomly pick up 100 or 1,000 trees. It will make the prediction. So I have the prediction done by, say, 1,000 decision trees, and then I take the average. So obviously it will take more time compared to decision tree, because in that one I am relying on maybe one decision tree. Here I am doing the same process over 1,000 decision trees, and then I am taking the average, and that's why it is called the random forest. It will take more time. Now the question would be that if that is the process I am following, why would I ever use decision tree? why would I not use random forest? Because it will always give me a better result compared to a single decision tree. And the answer lies in that one, that how much information gain you are really having. So suppose the random forest and the decision tree, both of these are giving us a very similar result. Then we know that random forest or taking the same information from different decision trees is not making much of a difference. And therefore, I could as well live with decision tree and not going for the forest. So if you're happy with the tree, I don't really want the forest. That could be one thing. Second thing, you have seen that the amount of time which is taken for training is actually very large difference. So some milliseconds compared to 1 minute, the difference could be very, very large. And if you see this process or this combination that we have tried out with the random forest is called ensemble method. It means that I am trying out different ways. And just to give you some hint about what could be the difference in the time taken. So if you have a 10,000 by 10,000 data set, it means that you have the shape of your data set is 1,000 by 1,000. It means that you have 1,000 observations and 1,000 features. If you run the regression on that kind of data set, and actually our data set is also not very different from here. So here you have 10,000 by 10,000, you have 1 million different data elements. In the housing price set that we have run, we had 20,000 into maybe about 10, so about 200,000 data elements. But for this 1,000 by 1,000 data set, typically, if we are running a regression, then it will be finished within a fraction of a minute. It means that it will just take a few seconds, doing the entire process. And if we go by, say, multiples of 10,000s by 10,000s, then the regression may take you another about, say, the training process of the regression may take you about 3 to 4 hours in a but if you compare that with the ensemble methods like, say, random forest, then this fraction of a minute will become few minutes. And if your data size is, say, tens of thousands of records and tens of thousands of features, then this 3 to 4 hour can actually become 12 to 24 hours. It means that about maybe 4 to 6 times more. That is what we are seeing in our own experiment. When we capture the time taken for random forest is actually much larger. So the question would be, so that is another consideration in deciding that whether I should live with the tree or I should go for the forest. So there are two things. If the tree itself is giving me a good result, so if a tree, suppose, we can say that if I can live with the mangoes of just one tree because that is sufficient for my family, do I really want to raise a forest of mangoes or a grove of mangoes? The answer would be that if that is the purpose, no. But if you are a farmer and you are living on selling the mangoes, then maybe you have to go for the mango grove or a mango forest. So one criteria is that is the result given by the decision tree itself is good enough. Can I live with that? So suppose the decision tree itself was giving me a result close to an R square of that was close to 0.8. I would be happy with that. Then I don't need to go for random forest. The second thing is that how much time and resources I have available. So if I want a quick result, if I don't have that much of a training time, then I will live with the tree and not go with the forest. Okay. So 4 different ways of computing this we have seen. Then there are certain other variations which is brought in to handle a few aberrations which arise, or to handle a few computational aberrations which arise when we run regression. So the regression model or the linear regression, when we run the linear regression, then what happens is that many times the system will, during the computation process, given the nature of the computation that we have for linear regression, certain features would be given very high weight. Now, there are methods that we would use which will ensure that no given feature is given a very high weight. During the training process itself, we penalize those algorithms where a very high weight would be given to one of the features. So suppose we have these 5 features of number of rooms, number of bedrooms, location, income, and so on. And suppose my regression algorithm is giving a very high weight to just one feature, which is say income. But we don't want the optimization process or the model to do that. In that case, we will say that during the optimization process, if the weight goes beyond a level, then it will be penalized, and therefore the system will not tend to give a very high weight to one of these uh, features. So that there are two different ways that we achieve that, and these two ways are called these methods are called the penalized regression method. It means that we run the regression method, but during the optimization process, we penalize the algorithm if the weight is weight given to any feature is very high. And how do we do that? We do that through two different methods called the ridge and the lasso. Okay, and how do these operate? Uh, don't get overawed by the equation that you are seeing here against the ridge and the lasso. Just try to understand it this way, that this part is my equation for finding out. Uh, this is this part is what I apply for regression, the normal linear regression. And this one we have understood. Maybe the mathematics or the notation of the mathematics could be somewhat complex, but this is what we have done even in our Excel sheet. What do we do? So what the system is doing is that it will assign weightage to each of these features. So this part, if you see, is my prediction. So what is happening here is that I multiply, say here they have given W, we have used the terms B1, B2, B3. So it is multiplying the B1 with X1, B2 with X2, find out the total, and then then I get the prediction. I compare the prediction with the actual value, which is the Y. I find the difference, and then we see that what the total error is, isn't it? Now in the process, what we do, that to this difference, to this error, I add another component. So I'll compute my error not just based on this formula, but I add another component where whatever is the weight, I take the square of that weight, multiply that with another factor called lambda, and then we add it to the error. So it means that my error is not just the difference between the actual and the total. My error would have another component. So if this value of, if the weight is high, then this error terms becomes high. And what does the system do? The system will try to minimize the error. And therefore, wherever the this weight is not too high, that is what would be considered as the minimum. The point to note here is that there are different ways to bring a sort of a normalized weight, and to ensure that the system is not giving very high weightage to one of the features. We apply certain penalization method, and there we penalize those models which will have a higher, which will give high weight to one of the features. So if we are taking the square of the weight, that process is called ridge, And if you just take the absolute value of the weight, that process is called lasso. So it is important to understand that when we run the regression, in many cases, the regression algorithm tends to provide a high weightage to one or two of the features, which if we consider as undesirable, in that case, we penalize the model, and the penalization is done based on the weights. So if the weights are given high, then it will penalize those models, and therefore it will ensure that the ultimate result that we get, or the would be having not a very concentrated weight, but maybe sort of reasonably distributed or normally distributed weightages for each feature. If we take the square of the weight as the penalty, then it's called a ridge regression. If we take the absolute value of the weight as penalty, that's called the lasso variation. So if you see, we had experimented with these models. So we have talked about the linear regression, how it works. We have talked about decision tree, how it works. We have talked about KNN regression, K nearest neighbor, how it works. Then we went into the random forest, which is a variation of the tree or the decision tree process. Then we talked about the ridge regression. Ridge regression, again, just to re-emphasize that it is a regression process itself. In this model, we ensure that the weightages that my regression model assigns to the different features, it does not end up assigning a very high weightage to any of the features. That is what the ridge and lasso ensure. So ridge, we penalize the regression model by the square of the weight, and in lasso regression, we penalize the regression model with the absolute value of the weight. So here, depending upon whether the original regression was assigning a very high weight to one feature or the other, you will see that there could be difference between the original model and the ridge model. And if it was not doing that, then obviously there would be not much of a difference between these three variations of regression in the first place. So if you see here, the R squared was 0.63. Even if we apply the ridge regression, it is 0.6349 and it was 0.6350, absolutely no difference. And in the lasso, there is no difference at all. It means that my regression in the first place was not giving a very high weightage to any one of the features that we had, and that's why we get very similar results for all the three variations of regression that we have run. But it's always good to do that, and so that we know that uh, whether it was assigning a very high weightage to one or two components or one or two attributes or not. So the ideal way, as I was saying, that in a data science project, what you would do is that you will run different models, see the performance of each model, and then we will choose whatever works best for us. There is another type of regression that we have run is called the Bayesian ridge, but since we have not discussed yet the Bayesian probability, we'll leave this for the time being. We'll take it up later. So actually we tried with 7 different regression models on our housing price data. And then we find that one of them, which is the random forest, is giving me a good result, it is 0.81. And therefore, this is the model that we would select. And of course, it could be further refined. And this is the challenge that you should take, that having got this, now think about that, can I really improve? So even if I have taken a decision that I'll go with random forest, are there certain other data cleansing process that I can do, which we have discussed earlier? So for example, only 2 things that we did here. One was so this result has been obtained after doing only 2 operations of data wrangling. That was, we did the one hot encoding and we had done the backfilling. These were the only two things we had done. Now what you should do is that try out running these algorithms or try out running these models by removing the outliers and see if there is a change in the result. By doing feature engineering, we had talked about that rather than taking the total bedrooms, can we convert that into total bedrooms in the house or total bedrooms per house? Would that give us somewhat better result? So we could experiment with other data cleansing and data wrangling processes and then run the regression on the enhanced data. So we could experiment with removing the outliers and then run the model, doing feature engineering, then run the model, then removing the highly collinear data by running the WIF, then run the model, or do a combination of all of these, then run the model. And then maybe one of these things will give you a result which is even higher than 0.81. Okay. So that's something I would urge you to experiment with. In doing that experimentation, if you come across any problem or if you get stuck, you can always get back to me. But it would be a good thing to, find, take out time and do that kind of experimentation, which will give you some feel of, how these predictive models are actually run by a data scientist. Any questions so far? Great. So today we have covered different types of regression. One more topic I want to cover today, that in our code there was something called the k-fold. Okay, so I'll cover the concept of the k-fold today. I think that k-fold is in which, just give me 1 second. I'll locate that file in which I have the description of the k-fold. Okay, this is also an important concept. So earlier we talked about, you're able to see my screen, isn't it? Now I have, yeah, so it's in the sharing mode. So earlier what we had done is that I have the data set and we divided that into two, training data and testing data. And we have understood what the rationale for that was. Another approach that we follow is that within the training data, during the training process itself, I would like to see how the training data is performing on the unseen data. So rather than completing the training process and then doing the seeing the performance on the unseen data, what we do is that during the training process itself, if I want to know that whether the model is performing equally well on the training data and some data which it has not seen. So what we do is that we divide the training data into different chunks. So we can divide the training data into say 5 chunks or 10 chunks, and these chunks are called the folds. So in this example, we have divided our training data into 5 different parts. And what the system does is that it will run my model, or it will run the model 5 times. So if you divide the data into 5 folds, it will run for 5 times. If you divide the data into 10 folds, it will run the same operation 10 times. What it does, that out of these 5 parts that I have divided my data into, one part will not be used for training. So these blue ones that you are seeing, in iteration 1, the fold 1 will not be used for training. Fold 1 is used for validation. So the remaining 4 folds, or remaining 4 parts of the data, will be taken up for training. So the system does the training on this one, and then it will validate that whether this training is working well or not by using the fold 1 as your test data. When it comes to the second iteration, it will keep the fold 2 aside, and the system would be trained on fold 1, fold 3, fold 4, and fold 5. And then after we have trained it on these 4 folds, I will test it or validate the results on fold 2. So that way, if I divide the data into, say, 5 folds, in each iteration, it will keep one fold aside, train on the remaining 4 fold, and then that fold would be, and the fold which was, or the part which was kept aside, that would be used for validation. It means that I run the algorithm, then I will use fold 2 as my test data. The benefit of that is that rather than just using one set for the testing, I end up validating this result on the entire data set one by one. And in the process, I'm able to validate much better whether whether the algorithm that we have obtained is working on the training data, as well as the data that it has not seen during the training, whether it is performing equally well or not. And as we have discussed, that is not really good enough to have a high R score or high RMSE on my training data. What is important is that whether it is giving me a higher result or a better performance on the testing data. So that we were doing anyway, but rather than doing that at the end of the entire training process, I bring that inside my training process and I train the model over and over again. And during each iteration of the training, we keep the data of the one set of data aside on which the validation would be done. The second thing also which comes out of this process is that I am testing the data on the test data only once. If I do it, say, 5 times during the training process, another thing that I would be able to see that what is the variability in my prediction. So suppose on fold 1, it is giving me a very good result. On fold 2, it's not giving me a good result. It means that the model is not really stable. It is giving good results in some cases, it is giving bad results in some other cases. And if the variation between one iteration and the second iteration is very high, then we will come to the conclusion that my model is not really stable. Maybe I can't use this model. So let's go back to the regression and see that how our, let me remove these things in notation. What is the type, what is the outcome that we get when we run multiple folds? So we come back to this one. So what I have done is a k-fold RMSE. So I have used 5 folds, and this is the RMSE at the end of each fold. So we see that there is a difference. In the first run, it gave me 68,000. So here what I have done is that I have taken out of these 5 folds that we have run, what is the min, max, average, and the standard deviation. So if the standard deviation is high, that means if the same model I run 2 times, I get different results. And that the system will always give you a very different results because the randomization process is involved in the optimization. So if you see, the linear regression is giving me is more stable because the range is not very vast. So when I run the first iteration, second iteration, third iteration, fourth iteration, fifth iteration, all these are the results from the 5 iterations. And in each iteration, I keep fold 1, fold 2, fold 3 for validation. So all these are results which I have got by running the regression on fold 1, fold 2, fold 3 up to fold 5. This is one way to compare that linear regression model. It is very stable. It is giving me the variance is only 650, or the standard deviation is only 650. You can see the range also. Whereas if we run the decision tree, it is high. RNN, KNN, anyway, it's not very reliable because my, the R square itself is very low, so I'm not going to consider that. When we come to random forest, it gives me a second set of validation that not only the R squared is high, not only the RMSE is low, but also when I do the validation or when we run multiple iterations, the variation is actually very less. It means that it is a very stable model. So that is another criteria that we use. So K-fold is, we take the data set, we divide that into parts. Then during the training process itself, I keep one part aside. I will run the training on remaining of the parts. And then I do the validation on one of these parts. And the validation which is done on one of these parts, I go on changing that. So in the first iteration, I'll do the validation on fold 1. In the second iteration, I do the validation on fold 2. And that's how I am able to assess the volatility or the stability of the model. Okay. So if there are any questions for today, then we will, I will take it now. Otherwise, you can note down the questions and we can start with those questions tomorrow morning. No questions for now? Sure. So if you have the question, just note down, then we'll start with the clarification tomorrow morning and then we'll proceed. So thanks, and we'll end the session now and we'll meet tomorrow.